Hi there. Welcome to the Masterclass on overcoming revenue decline in a downturn market. We've got a few guests entering at the moment, so I'm just allowing people in, but I'm really, really excited to have everyone here today with a sort of fortuitous opportunity to interview Gareth Flynn, the CEO of TQ Solutions. Hello, Gareth. Great to see you again today, and it's wonderful to connect in this amazing opportunity and really run this masterclass for professional services CEOs, owners, partners, and many senior leaders out there in the industry that are really going through some particularly challenging times. So I really want to welcome everyone first. As you're coming into this masterclass and getting yourself settled in. I want to acknowledge you for spending the time here today to kind of learn from some of the leaders in the industry. And we'll be jumping into this conversation with Gareth very, very soon. I also want to thank Leaderonomics, our partners at the moment, particularly in the Malaysian market, who are kind of leading this particular space in terms of education for management and leadership professionals around the world. But also, I want to thank you once again for being part of this conversation. And we'll jump into Gareth's introduction really, really soon. In addition, I do want to kind of sort of introduce myself. For those who don't know, I'm Dr. Avi Ratnanesan. I'm the sort of master coach. I help leaders with leadership and business growth. I've done a lot of work in thought leadership in publishing books to help leaders achieve transformations of their business. I'm a keynote speaker, and I also run a lot of learning and development programs for corporations across industries. And most recently, I've also launched a clone of myself, which Gareth, you've been able to experience. But the clone has become a digital twin to coaching of as well. Which is a bit of fun. So, Gareth, can you hear me okay at the moment?
Absolutely. Oh, crystal clear, Avi.
Crystal clear. Excellent. Very good. Well, I'm super excited. I'm going to stop the screen share right now and really just get into the conversation between you and I, and really dive into the topic of today, which is really, how do professional services CEOs overcome some of the challenges around revenue decline, but particularly hearing your story, because it's a real world story. Thank you for becoming a client on my CEO coaching program, Gareth. It's been wonderful to have you, and your story has been amazing, particularly in terms of you as a leader, but also the journey of TQ Solutions being, one of the foremost, I would say, sort of HR consulting firms, particularly in that talent acquisition space in Australia. Now, I know you do work in Australia, you do work in Europe and so on, but do you want to share a little bit about your journey and the journey of the company very quickly?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So firstly, great to be here. Thanks for the invite. It's lovely to be able to share the story, and hopefully your audience will get a few tips from me today. TQ Solutions is 16 years old as a business. I started the company actually during the global financial crisis, which was probably not the best time to start, but it taught me an awful lot. We're essentially a consulting and a quasi-outsourcing business operating in talent and workforce segments. In our consulting business, which is what we're best known for, we kind of have four pillars. So we work with enterprise customers on their talent and workforce strategy. We help them build the operating models that sit beneath that. We advise on HR technology and tooling that will support the op model. And we also help with employer branding and go-to-market recruitment marketing activity. So our aim really is to solve complex workforce and talent challenges for customers. And yeah, it's been a fascinating 16 years. And I think fiscal 24 in Australia, fiscal year finishes at the end of June. It's probably one of the toughest years of that 16-year journey. So, but through toughness, you learn. So hopefully share some of that with you today.
Yeah, fantastic. And to have that resilience, that longevity in the market, Gareth, is it's a rare ability to be able to lead a firm through that kind of duration. Let's get a bit into sort of what triggered the downturn in the first place, right? You said it's one of the toughest years that you've had on record. Now we all know about some of the big four getting in trouble, and sort of investigations were sort of underway around that time, mid last year, and that was one of the factors. But what do you think? What else do you think triggered some of the downturn that's occurred?
Yeah, look, I think firstly the downturn was took a lot of people by surprise with how steep it was following fiscal 22 and fiscal 23, which for us were record years back to back. So we'd come out of COVID, which was obviously a pretty bleak period, had two substantially record years. And then really from kind of July onwards, we started to see some tightening, which manifested into revenue decline as we moved into that kind of October, November period quite acutely. I look back and I think, Australia, like most countries, we're under high interest rate pressure at the moment, which is hitting consumers. Consumers aren't spending very much. And I think a lot of corporate Australia cut budgets in fiscal 23. So they really acutely cut, particularly CapEx budgets for things like technology and big change programs where we typically get involved. So I do think the interest rate environment, the consumer recession we're having here locally has had a material impact on particularly companies facing into the consumer segments. So that's been a huge influence. I think unfortunately with the what happened with PwC last year, we're also seeing both federal and state governments massively reducing their spend on consulting services. They are building their own capability. And in fact, there was an article in today's Financial Review, New South Wales government is really scrutinising where third-party consultants are being used and where they should be being used. Now, we typically haven't done masses in the government sector, but obviously the less work in government means other firms like the Big Five are coming into other areas, and that just makes it a more competitive market as well. So it's been a multitude of things. I think economic slowdown is driven most of it, but the kind of reputation of brand consulting has really been impacted this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And, certainly we've seen retrenchments across some of the big four, particularly make the headlines in the last 12 months. And, that sort of has had a flow-on effect in terms of, how professional services are consumed in the marketplace in terms of both supply and demand side economics. Now, going back to that time, Gareth, in terms of when the downturn started to be quite acute for a lot of companies, particularly sort of the July quarter and the October quarter, and particularly acute for you in that October quarter. What was your initial impression of how you were going to respond to that, sort of decline in revenue?
Yeah, look, I think as well, Avi, just before I answer that directly, the backdrop, and again, I'll just take you back. We're coming off a record year. We've grown quite substantially as a business. We do have quite an interesting workforce model. We've always had a heavy, flexible, contingent workforce and a smaller permanent workforce. But that permanent workforce was the largest it's ever been coming into this financial year, reflective of the fact that we were so busy in the 2 years prior, and to secure talent, we needed to offer permanent roles. So I think is an interesting context and backdrop. Now, as things quieten down, we are able to flex down our flexible workforce, and we've done that over the years really effectively. But I think for me, what started to become concerning, certainly as I was starting to project to Christmas, was the utilization of my permanent team and the cost base that I was carrying into the business, into what I could see becoming quite a softening market. So my immediate reaction, which I obviously know this, was okay. Where can I trim costs out of my business? Where I've got a revenue problem that's creating a profit problem, and therefore my mind went straight away to how can I try and trim some OPEX. Now, as a business, we're probably 75-80% loaded on staff costs in OPEX. So
Yeah.
it's very minimal amounts I can tweak around the edges.
Yeah.
So, you know, my mind was starting to think about labor cost reductions, permanent labor cost reductions, like every other consulting firm and outsourcing company was doing at the time.
Yeah.
But then half of me was also thinking, hey, can we ride this out? Can we think slightly differently? Can we think creatively with leave and other factors? And can we ride this out and, you know, roll the dice in many regards that things will pick up in the new year?
Yeah.
And that's really around the time that we first started really talking about the business.
Yeah.
But that was that's where I went to first. It's how do I cut costs, do what everyone else is doing, and could we write it out if we didn't do that? And obviously for me, I want to keep people in jobs. I want my people to stay in jobs. I want to keep the team I've built over the years.
Yes.
For me, my permanent team particularly, I wanted to safeguard as much as possible.
Yeah. And, you know, Gareth, the journey that you went through, I mean, many were, you know, experiencing that even during the pandemic, that sort of notion of, hey, look, you know, the market's declining, and we've seen these peaks and troughs in the market, and some of that notion of, okay, how do I deal with the forward-looking outlook when it's unpredictable, right? We're constantly living in this VUCA world with a lot of volatility, uncertainty, and you as a leader having to be very dynamic with, and also in terms of your forecasting ability, you know, there being very different potential future scenarios.
Yeah.
And how you make those decisions. How are you feeling personally as a leader at that time? Because that's quite a lot to bear, considering, you know, you're a leading consulting firm, you've got a significant permanent workforce, you know, you're sort of driving the ship, as it were. How did it feel at the time?
Yeah, look, I won't lie, Avi, I was a very stressed individual, and manifesting itself in, you know, sleepless nights and constantly thinking about work and where the next dollar is going to come from. You know, I think any business owner or business leader will probably say the same. So, you know, it's not always full of roses and lots of high fives. You know, we've been through some pretty tough periods. But I think what kind of got me, you know, even going through COVID, which is our second global crisis we've been through, I kind of knew what we were in, and everyone was in the same boat, and we had a layer of government support. And I think it was such a major global crisis that there was a lot of safeguards put in place for small businesses.
Yes.
You know, for which I'm really grateful.
Yeah.
But this particular downturn, there's no safeguards. There's no security blanket from government. There's no ability to really get support. You have to kind of get out of it yourself. And I think that was pretty scary, but also it was more unknown. I mean, I read the financial press every day, you know, predictions of a lengthy downturn, predictions of an implosion of consulting businesses, continuous stream of redundancies being announced from many of the firms. It was kind of really pressing. It was hard. It was really difficult and challenging. And probably that and March this year, and probably going into March this year, were two of my, definitely personally most difficult periods of my career, I think.
You know, thank you for sharing that. You know, I think that vulnerability is so important in leadership, and catalyzing sort of a turnaround, if you will, or the start of it. When we met around that time, obviously, and started working together, how did you start to turn things around, particularly in terms of sales? Because that's what everyone looks at, right? In terms of immediate cash flow coming through the door, getting new clients on board. That's where the mind first goes in terms of a rescue. Apart from, you know, how do I shave costs? How did that shift? How did that mind shift occur for you? And what did you do to get the ball rolling again in some way, Gareth?
Well, firstly, I had a very intelligent person say some words along the lines of, you cannot cut your way out of a revenue problem. And that was you. So I think there was a rewire of thinking and a bit of a challenge. I mean, at the time, and for the audience, it's fair to say, RV unpacked with me how we've traditionally won work, where we get work from, the strength of our reputation and brand, the amazing network we have, the amount of referred work we've traditionally got. And I think you realised that we did have something quite special in there, but we weren't really leveraging it as much as we probably should. And because of the amount of referred work and inbound work we've traditionally had, our sales machine, if I can call it that, was pretty immature. We've not had to rely on aggressive sales or business development in the past. Work's come to us pretty freely over the years, which has been great. But we hadn't really built the muscle, I think, to go to market in a more proactive manner. But I do think that statement of you can't cut yourself out of a revenue crisis was a key moment for me. And as I always tend to do, I take something like that out when I'm running or cycling or walking my dog on the beach, and I chew over it. I chew over something like that, and it was drawing one of those walks. I think it was with my dog Milo at the time. I conceived of a new strategy for me and the team, which was and it was partly due to something you also suggested about the cut through you can get from direct reach outs to your client network. And so I came back home, I got very excited, wrote a message to my leadership team saying I've got this great new idea, and it was to basically reach out to a minimum of 250 individuals to generate between 25 and 50 meetings that would deliver at least 10 projects. And I set ourselves an objective of bringing in $500,000 worth of fee income in I think it was 7 weeks maybe before Christmas, to try and build our pipeline for the new year, where we were looking pretty exposed. And so that was kind of my approach. It was, okay, let's try something different. Let's try something really positive. We can all, there's meaningful progress by doing this. And obviously then I had to galvanize the broader team around that challenge.
Yeah, and it was very the process that we went through around sort of segmenting high potential prospects and customers and direct messaging them, ensuring that the copy kind of really was targeted, resonant, and so on. Really seemed to have, as you said, galvanize some of that sales in the early stages. But then you kind of evolve that as well in terms of, as sort of clients started getting traction, and one of your strengths in terms of your IP that you have amongst yourselves and your team, sort of you started to market differently, or really not market differently, but I said in a more mature way moving forward as well. Can you talk a bit about what you did in terms of that thought leadership, how you analyze the market differently, and what you did there?
So I know a couple of years ago we started to think about our different parts of our business and put them on a growth matrix. We're consultants, so it was a 2x2. But where have we got fantastic capability where we can deliver now, and where do we think there is growth in market? So we paused and actually recalibrated that particular exercise for the conditions we were seeing in market. And there were a few areas where we certainly felt there was going to be increased activity during calendar year 2024. One of those, for example, was the interest by organizations in the move towards being skills-based and skills-powered. So that, for example, was deemed to be high growth. We needed to build more capability. We didn't have fantastic capability, but we had some. So we basically thought about the market, what we were seeing as signals from clients and contacts and the broader industry press, and we recalibrated the type of things we wanted to go to customers with. And then, we got really tactical in terms of the 250 people, which turned out to probably be more like 350. Who are they? What's their role? Where do they work? What industry are they in? And what were we going to pitch to them from our product set? So we actually thought about the individual. And then it was who's got the best relationship in the team to be able to really go and make that a very credible, meaningful approach to that person. So we went through quite a meticulous exercise of basically downloading all of our networks, clients, past clients, connections, and went through that exercise very, very, very quickly. So that was the context. I think the other thing, Arby, I would probably also add, not everyone in my company is comfortable in sales.
Yes.
And especially in what they would think of as traditional sales.
Yes.
And so I also challenged a number of people in terms of what can they do outside of some of this direct outreach activity, which they deem to be sales. And that, one of my team took it upon herself to start a interview series on all things AI and assessment. Another person did some industry research into a particular segment we do quite a lot of work in to publish some great material. So all of that stuff we were building could easily be distributed through our networks. And we were obviously encouraging people to be very active on things like LinkedIn and to continue their building of personal brand and to share and connect and promote things that are being produced. So I think we got proactive. We leveraged strengths of people. Another good example, I think, which I'll share with the audience, which was really was one of my colleague Will's idea. He runs our brand practice, our employer brand practice. He decided to run a series of masterclasses for industry. He wanted to share some of the IP we have as a business, bring in 20 to 30 people into a city, and have a day's masterclass where we introduce concepts and content and things that people could practically do to improve their brand positioning and function. And he ran that in front of about 80 people over the course of a 2-month period. And that was a paid event. People paid to attend, but they were immersed into TQ's way of doing employer branding. And learned and got a lot from it. So we just got really creative, Arby, if I'm really honest. We just got really creative in some of the things we did pre-Christmas, particularly.
But there's two or three very, very distinctive changes in mindset. We deal with a lot of neuroscience in coaching leaders, and the typical pattern when a leader becomes stressed is almost a fear-based response. And in a lot of those situations, it becomes, how do I cut my labor costs? But then it's a supply side focus as opposed to a demand side focus, where, in your case, you started to think about, what do my customers actually need now and in the future? Where is growth going to occur? Where is demand going to grow? And how do I shift my people or my greatest assets to serve that demand, right? And the focus of the thinking shifted in that direction, which then led to a different sense of, okay, what's the IP that we need to create? What's the skills, and how do I motivate my teams to now serve in a greater fashion to the client base that we already have, to the big market that you already, and the relationships that you've already galvanized over the years, and how do you serve them in a greater fashion moving forward, right? So it shifted from that reactive to proactive, as you said. And then you focused on, well, where are those demand areas for the future? Where can we create thought leadership, and how can we be creative? So you started to tap into more the creative juices of the team, and you galvanize them, and particularly in those areas where typically you said, they didn't have the skill, or they didn't have the confidence or the competence or the motivation to sell in a traditional fashion. They started to tap into a different energy of creativity to solve the problem, the common problem in the business. Right.
Yeah, no, look, I totally agree with that. And, the message to the team was, this is the situation, I need your help. We're in this together. This is our goal and objective. Whatever you're comfortable doing to help us move to that goal and objective, you're going to get supported to do it. Let's get creative. Let's think about what we can do should be doing, but here's the areas we want to focus on. But I think, that at the time, a lot of the team, mostly day to day, don't concern themselves about the business development pipeline or the P&L and the performance, and because it's just not part of their job. But what we had to do is really kind of unpack where we were at as a business and what it could mean, and the uncertainty at the time. And look, Harvey, it was really uncomfortable for a lot of people. We monitor our ENPS scores each quarter, and we definitely took a dip in that period because we had flexible workers who we had to switch off because we didn't have work for them. But we still capture their sentiment. And obviously we were asking people in the business to do stuff they're not used to doing. And I mean, the messaging in the market at the time was pretty bleak. So I think the mood changed in the business, but the fact we were quite a tight team. And I think once we sort of solidified around a goal and an objective, it did give us a bit of a motivation and drive to do stuff. We were frenetically speaking at conferences and trying to get ourselves on podcasts, and use our PR person to try and get us in front of people. And November was great. I think we spoke in front of 1,000 people in November across 2 different events, and they're all free. We didn't pay for any of them. So yeah, we just I think the goal of $500,000, that 250, 25, 10 kind of strategy was a good motivator for a number of the people on the team.
Yeah, and that's a really key point. I want to stay on this concept of team at the moment, because for most CEOs, the senior leadership team and how you enable them moving forward, not just the senior leadership, but the broader organization, is key to that sort of turnaround, transformation, whatever you want to call it, back to growth. Now, there are many aspects of team that we talk about. You talked a little bit about motivation, because obviously, and one of the things I like about you and TQ Solutions is that even though you're a relatively small company, you still collect data on your employee engagement. You measure that, you respond to that dynamically, and that's probably one of the big reasons for your success over 16 years, is because of your focus on people. Now there's the aspect of motivation, which we talked about, in engagement, but there's also the aspect of utilization. Right, in professional services, we work on billable hours, right? And our revenue is almost a direct or indirect function of the hours that we bill for. And then there's the aspect of skills, which we can also talk about in a minute. But do you want to talk a bit about looking at reviewing utilization? Because when it comes to difficult times, we often look at that fractional capacity and how well we utilize that. What did you do in that particular aspect over this last 9 months, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so again, some history and context is useful. We never used to track utilization in the early days because we had a smaller perm team. As that permanent team grew, it became more of a thing I was interested in because we had a heavy contingent base, and are we using contingents and paying money when we could be using our perm team? But I think this financial year has really brought that home in terms of more acute sort of tracking of utilization. And for us, again, we're not a big five firm, so we don't have to have people on 130% utilization. We actually have very sensible utilization objectives. So firstly, we think in terms of available hours. We have a lot of part-time workers, both contingent and perm, and not everyone wants to work 5 days a week. So we think about what's their available hours. We also absolutely don't want people working between 90 and 100% utilization for a long period of time. So we typically use a 90% threshold of 90% is kind of 100% in our world. But we also then look at their job. So if their job is to run a practice or to do a heavy amount of external business development or client-facing activity, then clearly we can't have them on 70% utilization either. One of our HR team is HR for TQ, is also an HR consultant. Well, they have to have a different utilization threshold to others. So we actually kind of contextualize utilization for the role someone's doing in the business, but build in some slack so that they're not, working ridiculous hours and at their own kind of well-being cost. So I think we've got better, nowhere near perfect at tracking utilization. I think in the period to Christmas, we were about 10 percentage points lower than where I wanted us to be as an average utilization for our perm team. And that's because we didn't have the work. We just didn't have the work to actually deploy people to. It wasn't because we were using contingent workers when we shouldn't. We were just underutilized because we didn't have the work. But it's something we've got to keep tracking. I say I don't think we're a small business. We're not flush with lots of resource to do all the reporting, but we review it quarterly, particularly, just to see where we're at and how we're traveling.
And there's a good point for members of the audience to, if you have any comments or questions, you can start writing them into LinkedIn at the moment, and post them there, because we will have probably a couple of minutes to ask Gareth some questions as we're going through, because I'm sure, everyone in the audience is going, oh, utilization, how do I measure it? What technology do you use? All those sorts of things, right? But let's just stay on track a little bit. But if there are questions around this, please, for people in the audience, type them into the chat box or LinkedIn, and we'll try and get to it. Now, shifting from utilization monitoring and how to adapt to those to the individual's preferences and the needs of the business, that's a whole other podcast we can do in itself. But I want to touch base on skills, because you're an expert on skills, and you've been doing some global research in this space, which is going to be super amazing. And you've been releasing a lot of that in your LinkedIn and your podcast and so on as well. Can you talk us a bit about what you did in terms of, looking at the skills or reviewing the skills of your internal staff, and how did you think about that and deploy that? Because you talked a bit about, yes, redeploying some of that to sales, but what was your take on that during that time, and how has your skills research sort of fed into this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as we conducted our assessment of what we thought the market was going to look like in terms of activity and areas of growth, we also reflected on the skills and capability of the team. So we did conduct a kind of overlay of where could we deploy people if these assumptions of growth and client activity hold up. And it was an exercise both to see where we could basically move people within different types of projects that they may not be used to working on, or also where we may have some capability gaps in team members that we wanted to upskill, or where we've got gaps more broadly as a business. So we reviewed the likely market conditions, overlaid with who could move into some of these projects if we won them, and it helped us do a bit of a skill gap analysis. I mean, as an example, Avi, one of my team, we recognize that change management capability is sadly lacking in many enterprise clients at the moment. And some of the work we're doing they have some pretty hefty change management downstream likelihood of work that needs to be done. So we clearly want to build more strength in that area, so that we can do more downstream work and support in change. And one of my team actually took herself off and did a ProSci change management course to respond to that. Is an area where she felt she needed more skills and a refresh in some of that area. And she basically decided, right, I need to upskill and I'm going to do this. And therefore she'll secure more change work through us in the future. So, I think it was a useful exercise to do. And it certainly resulted in some people shifting their focus within the business.
Yeah. How did you do that skills analysis? So you said ProSci was kind of one tool that you use, but what are you finding from your skills research that you're doing in terms of an approach, right? Is there a system or a method that you review?
Yeah, look, I think so for the audience, my skills research commenced in late December, and it was really responding to some inner skeptic I had on my shoulder about whether the move to being skills-based was the right thing to do in the first place. So I wanted to unpack the strategy of skills. Is it relevant for our customers? We've been telling them it was, because we'd swallowed Gartner's and Mercer's and Deloitte's and Accenture's material, but we've never questioned it. So I wanted to question it, which is really important. And then secondly, we wanted to understand, how do we know if someone's ready to move on that journey, and what are their gaps, and how do they think about skills and their organization in terms of where to start? So we've been speaking to companies all around the world that have been doing this, including Ericsson and Microsoft and NASA. I even had a conversation with NASA, which was amazing. A couple of our customers we've been supporting in this space. And we've been building our point of view on skills. So that's, in fact, I'm heading to Stockholm on Friday to talk at a conference on my research, which is super exciting.
Amazing.
But in terms of how we did it, we're not a big business, so we know our people really well. But if you're let's say you're an Ericsson or a Microsoft, you've got hundreds of thousands of people working for you. You have to rely on more technology-oriented solutions and probably some AI. We don't need to do that as a business. We just need to really think about an individual, what they've done for us in the past, what skills they have that are very, very highly tuned, where there may be some development opportunities. And we're small enough to do that on a kind of individual by individual basis. And this is our world. This is what we do as a business. We're pretty attuned to assessing skills of people. So we did that through a mixture of top-down review and also consultation with individuals as well, and talk to them about areas of interest and where they want to develop further. So it was an intimate way of doing it, but we're small, we can do that. Larger companies are absolutely having to rely on some of the new breed technology in this space to do that type of work. I mean, ultimately, you want to know what skills people have and what they want to do with those skills in terms of the work that they're desiring to do in the future. That's kind of what you want to know.
And those are powerful questions. But if I take the bigger context of this, for the benefit of the audience, is that we've gone from a world post-pandemic in 2022 of what we used to call a workforce shortage to then getting smarter at defining the challenge within organizations, which is actually skill shortage, which is really then getting even deeper to saying, hey, there are specific capabilities that every individual has that can be defined through tools and technologies, but also through quite intimate conversations like you had with your team, and actually asking them, what would you like to do? And how can we get your, call it skills or strengths out more into the business, which therefore then helps solve the problem of business growth, right? So you're actually aligning the challenge of revenue decline and business growth to actually, how do we harness the untapped potential within our people to actually solve that market problem, right? And if every company did this, or rather than going from, hey, I just need to scratch off some of my bottom line here, or some of my costs and expenses, to actually rethinking, how do I actually tap into the potential of my people to actually solve this problem, and what are the mechanisms and methods in order to do that, to serve my customers better, to grow the business. Like, that's a big transformation in itself, isn't it, Gareth, in terms of
absolutely. It's a whole new mindset shift, but that's the benefit of adopting a skills-based strategy, particularly for enterprises. It's what they want, more workforce liquidity or agility, however you want to phrase it. But again, another example from my team, one of my team members has a very strong HR background, always had an interest and desire to do more in technology. But technology is quite scary. It's full of language and terminology you're not used to. And we took the opportunity for that individual to basically shadow one of our specialists in tech during the course of the January to March period. And now today she's running not by herself, she has a team with her, but she's running a tech related project without the kind of tech specialist support, because she's now got the confidence to do it. So I think we've certainly helped upskill a few people along the way. We've got more work to do, because we want to create more breadth in terms of our T-shape. You obviously can have I-shaped people who are very deep specialists. We want more T-shaped people with the top of the T being a bit deeper, so we can move people to work, and we can more effectively move individuals. You know, it could be someone in the brand practice supporting someone in the talent acquisition world. So we need to create that more fluid approach to our workforce, so that we can move people around a lot more effectively than I think we have in the past.
And we're coming to the last few minutes, so I am looking for any further questions. And there's one that came up, Gareth, from the audience, from Harish Shah, who's listening in at the moment. What do you think about outsourcing in terms of potential strategy? I know you and I have talked about it a bit, but what do you think about that in terms of outsourcing certain functions or role types to allow you to, or some of the team members to focus on core activities? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, we do outsource. Technically we outsource finance to an accounting company. We're pretty skinny when it comes to things like technology. We use product, but we don't have a tech team managing it. So I think for us as a business, it's probably not, unless we offshored outsourced, particularly something like finance, then there's no real cost benefit for us. But for larger companies, then there's absolutely efficiency savings to be had in the obviously in the sort of more corporate areas. And Arvi, and for your guest there, I mean, we have an outsourcing arm, so clients use us as part of their outsource strategy for HR and talent. So whilst we consult, we also execute where clients don't have the capacity or capability to do it. So we firmly believe in outsourcing as a strategy, particularly in some of those corporate functions.
Yeah, so you kind of enable that yourself, but it's something that you are kind of considering or looking at. Oh, you do that in the accounting function, but something that potentially could be done more of as well. And that's an interesting one. Coming to then the journey of taking on a coach, Gareth, love to hear, what are your thoughts for what has been your journey in terms of what do you think that's done for the business on one hand, and what do you think that's done for you personally in terms of professional growth? Because there's often a concept of there's a lot of let's just say resistance to sort of ask for help in the first place from a lot of CEOs that I've worked with, and I know you've worked with a lot of senior leaders as well. And to take on a consultant is about inviting somebody external in to your organization and almost sort of looking through the weeds and then having to clean them up or tidy them up. What's been your journey in terms of your professional things?
Yeah, look, I think I've turned to external coaching 3 times during the 16 years at different periods of the journey, and for different reasons. I typically use an external when I have big decisions to make, and I need to think through those decisions, but also challenge my assumptions and maybe the way I'm thinking about stuff, because I'm so ingrained in the company. So I've lent on external coaching throughout my journey, and I think that's also a recognition by me that I haven't got all the answers. So I'm not a founder of a business that thinks that they know everything. I don't, and there are smarter people out there that can help me think through problems. I mean, I'm very good at analyzing and thinking about problems individually, but sometimes I need, like you did with you can't cut yourself out of a revenue problem. I need to chew over that, but I need that stimulus to get me thinking in a different way. So I think, and the other thing for me, it's sometimes good to be talking to those outside the company, because I can talk about the people in the team quite freely with an external, where I may have that conversation maybe slightly different if I'm talking to people internally. So there is that freedom to express you can only really get with an external, but particularly challenge thinking and to come up with different ideas or different thoughts, different patterns of thinking is where I've got huge value. And I think in terms of outcome for business, our pipeline, when I set that goal of $500,000 pre-Christmas, we landed in that target timeframe nearly $900,000 worth of new work. Now, subsequent to that, we had a pretty tough kind of Jan-March period because everything went really quiet for Christmas. And then things have really started to pick up. We're going to actually have our record quarter for the year in this back end of the financial year. Still not as good as fiscal 22 and 23, but it's good. We're back to some healthy profits. And a lot of the work we brought in this quarter we're in now, obviously is emanated from this wave of brand and marketing activity and the flurry of work that we've been doing in the last 6 or so months. And now we've got to learn around what are our rhythms going to be moving forward, because we can't stop some of this stuff. We won't want to. And as we get busy executing, we've still got to keep being busy with the brand and marketing work we're doing. So, ultimately, Avi, I think I'd have made some wrong decisions if I hadn't have worked with you at the time.
Do you think it's affected revenue or helped to sort of?
Yeah, definitely. As I said, that the strategy pre-Christmas, particularly that first wave of focus, it was directly emanated from one of our first sessions. So I wasn't thinking that way. I was thinking, EY and PWs and everyone else is chopping people. Do I need to chop people?
Interesting. And what about your personal, in terms of your personal mission, right? Because I know you're such an inspiring leader, and you do have a mission for what you want to do in the world. How is that has it helped in terms of your personal inspiration, drive, mission, and so on?
Yeah, look, I'll share with the audience. I have 2 key kind of aims in life. One is to challenge boundaries, and that's to challenge my own boundaries, whether it be mental or physical. I do lots of endurance sport, but also challenge the boundaries of people's thinking around work and career and talent. So challenge boundaries is one. And for me, inspiring others is another, whether it's my family, my kids, my peers in the industry, clients, colleagues. And so for me, I want to have a greater impact on the world of work. And if it wasn't for some of the things we've done, I wouldn't be speaking in Stockholm next week at a conference. So I've never had an international speaking gig before. And it's what an opportunity to be able to go to Europe and talk about my skills research. So that may open a whole load of different doors that I'm not expecting or haven't expected in the past. So so the mindset shift has just given me a bit more of a lot more positive outlook on life. But it has definitely had a material impact on business performance and brand as well.
And knowing what you know now, Gareth, what would you tell other CEOs who are kind of in similar situations? They're sort of, challenged in terms of their sales or revenue decline. They're considering, or they're perhaps quite stressed themselves about some of these challenges. What would you say to them in terms of, kind of either seeking help or seeking a coach? What would your recommendation be, knowing what you know now and having achieved what you achieved?
Yeah, look, I think the value is there to talk to someone externally. At the time, I think you'll probably remember, Avi, I was actually quite guilty about spending the money hitting the P&L when I was trying to reduce OPEX. So there's a kind of guilt factor you've got to overcome. But there's value in that spend that magnifies way beyond the spend itself. So I think, I wouldn't claim that, we did everything right last year, but just pause and have dialogue with an external and understand what are your options, because sometimes we're blinkered on those options. Now, for some companies, downsizing may be the only option. You're not taking that off the table, but you need to be really clear on the problem you're trying to solve and what your option set is to solve them. And I think you can only do so much of that internally. Sometimes you just need that external in. Again, I'm a consultant. That's what clients engage us to do. I think founders and leaders need to do the same.
Yeah. That's brilliant. And let's talk a bit about the future, Gareth. The final question. And we've, I think, addressed a lot of the audience questions, and I think I've asked many as well. And this has been such a fascinating conversation that I know it's just going to blow the minds of a lot of professional services CEOs out there. But I know in terms of moving forward, you've got a number of things in your play. What does the future look like for you? Obviously, you've already started playing with the clone. My clone, in terms of that being a tool to from a digital twin perspective to enable your success moving forward. But what else are you looking forward to in the next few months for your business?
Yeah, look, I think for us, we've got to stay very close to tech and AI and how we can leverage it as a business, either to make us more efficient or productive, but also to potentially build some new services and products. We're exploring something at the moment, which I think is quite exciting in that space. So I think, we have to stay on top because we're consulting in this space. So we have to eat our own dog food, if I can use that expression. So I think I'm excited about what that could bring. I'm also excited about the disruption it will cause, because that will require some real thinking for our clients. And that's going to generate some really interesting work, I think, for us as a business in the coming years. And then for me, with TQ, we have aspirations to do more on a global stage. We did a really interesting project last year with Philips in Europe, which is our first European H-quartered business that project was delivered and run from Europe. And we want to do more globally. I think there's nothing stopping an Australian business doing more globally, especially post-COVID, where we went over to Netherlands, met the client, met in person, spent a week there, and we delivered the rest of the project from here. So there's nothing stopping us doing more work like that. And again, we also look forward to seeing where our clients take us, because over the years we've morphed and moved, and that's, so we're learning constantly. It's fantastic. So more impact. Probably a little bit more global work, and helping to solve some of the challenges that clients are going to face moving forward. I get excited by that. I get a kick. And if we can build a brilliant business, ultimately at some point there'll be an exit I've got to work through. Don't know what that looks like yet, but that'll start to materialize, I'm sure, over the next few years.
Yeah, excellent, Gareth. Now, clearly, you're talking about the future being, geographical expansion, harnessing technology, and expanding your product set into new segments, but also deepening your value proposition with existing customers as well, right? And in the markets that you're doing. Mate, congratulations on all the work you've done so far. And to everyone listening, we will be, sharing some of this recording with you moving forward. Gareth, thank you very, very much for the conversation so far. I am kind of still looking out for questions whilst I pull up the screen, but mate, amazing work. You've been a phenomenal leader, and thank you for sharing all those insights with, other leaders out there in the marketplace, because that's, for me, that's really true leadership, is when you're kind of willing to open up and share. It's not an easy thing to do. It takes courage, it takes skill, but clearly you've done the work and you're getting the results for it. And, I look forward to continuing to work together. And before we close, just some final kind of sharing here of, for those who'd like to be in touch, that's a sort of messy screen there, but I will pull up my final slide for everyone who wants to. Now, we did already address questions throughout, but for those who want to know more, obviously, Gareth's contact details are there if you'd like to get in touch with him and interact with his business, which highly recommend you do. And for those who want to speak to me and want to sort of get in touch and find out more about my coaching services and also my clone. So we're doing a free trial at the moment of my clone for those who are interested in experiencing that. Gareth's already had some fascinating insights from that discussion, but I'd love to hear from everyone. Please get in touch on LinkedIn or snap this little QR code here, which will get in touch with my WhatsApp, either if you're in Australia, Malaysia, any other part of the world. I want to thank Gareth and TQ Solutions again for your time. And also want to thank my partners in Malaysia, Leaderonomics, who are sort of co-hosting and co-promoting this particular event as well. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the week, rest of the day, rest of the year. I look forward to staying in touch. Gareth, thank you so much once again.
No problem.
Yeah, and all the best to everyone out there. Look forward to kind of hearing from you. Take a quick snapshot of what's here in case you'd like to stay in touch further.
Great stuff. Thanks, Harvey.
Thank you, Gareth. Bye, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.